think that when you look at art and when you create art, it teaches you how to look at the world more critically. It teaches you how to understand your environment. When you look at what's going on around you, when you observe, not just look, but observe, you stop and think about why I'm doing this. Why do these things, why does life work around us like this?
Half a mile to the west would be overflying the field.
I like to tell stories with my painting. I like to communicate an idea. You know, these are stories of people under duress, under extreme circumstances. There are dark stories and then there are tales of heroism. This is humanity at its extreme. Art has always been the thing that I've been good at. Ever since I was a kid, art is one thing that I've always enjoyed. I like older subjects. I like very old airplanes. Primarily what I paint is from the era of World War I, and of course the Old West scenes that I paint. And I would credit my father. My father introduced me to airplanes when I was about 6 or 7 years old. He bought me a model airplane that I put together, and it was all downhill from there. I fell in love with airplanes. I fell in love with history. World War I is actually the first modern war that the world was ever involved with. And these people that flew these planes, they had a rough idea of how they worked, but there was a lot they didn't know too. It was almost a man at the mercy of his technology at the time. A lot of the reason why a lot of these pilots went into aviation because they wanted to get out of the trenches, but as it turns out, some of these pilots, it was just as raw and just as tough for them up in the air as it was down on the ground. There are photos of some World War I pilots, a before and after shot of a photo in May, and then in October, you can just see how much they've aged in those few months in between. It's just unreal, the stress that they went to. As far as gathering my inspiration, I do have to do a lot of traveling because living in North Carolina, the Western resources are out west. The first time I ever went out west, I was in my 20s. Now, I grew up in South Carolina. I'm used to trees all around me. I'm used to, not being able to see the horizon. And I went to South Dakota, and there are no trees out there. And I remember driving across the prairie and looking out, and I could see 20 miles out in front of me, and it took my breath away. And that really became a second love. I was just amazed that you could see that far. And just the rock structures, the mountains are bigger, the colors are brighter. As an artist, it takes my breath away every time I go out there. I really fell in love with the wide open spaces out there, with the landscape, with the people and stories involved out there, the people who carved out the West, 100, 150 years ago. Prayer for the Bounty. That particular painting was inspired by a song by a North Carolina musician named Warren Haynes, Glory Road, which it's a song about a bounty hunter in the Old West who's been sent out into the Badlands to track down his bounty. And he does his job, he shoots his bounty, he's bringing it in, but it turns out this fugitive is just a kid. He's maybe 16 or 17 years old, and this bounty hunter is just filled with regret that he's had to shoot such a young guy, and he's convinced now that his soul is damned to hell. And a lot of my inspiration, as far as the Western stuff, does come from contemporary Western ideas, movies, music, what have you, because that's what a lot of people are stuck with. You know, we can't go back in time and live 150 years ago. And then, of course, I do fall back on the history books to see what actually happened and see how I can kind of translate that back into a historical and an accurate context. I just love the idea of, you know, this happened here, and this is how it happened. These are the people who did that. You know, these days we live in a modern world where even airplanes, you're flying by computer. And I think the reasons why I'm really intrigued by the interaction of human beings directly with the machine, or directly with an animal, or directly with the environment. I like that direct interaction. You know, like in World War I, where the pilot is actually sitting in the environment. You're sitting in an open cockpit with the wind blowing in your faces, and your hand is on that stick, and that stick is directly controlling the ailerons. It's all up to you. Or whether you're riding on a horse in a dust storm and the dust is blowing in your face, it shows on the character of those people and the stories involved. I love painting the character on people's faces. And the historical scenes and the stories involved.